Okay, here's the tutorial on how to animate a still photo using Photoshop and Final Cut Express. On the class website, I've got a couple of sample images for you here. They're quite high resolution. If you're going to be doing a Google image search looking for some of your own files later on, make sure that you are finding images that are about 2000 by 2000 pixels. That'll give you enough information for an HD frame size. If you thought you were going to be doing a lot of zooming in on the image, you might want an even higher resolution photo so that you've got extra pixels to work with. I'm going to try this image of the helicopter, so I'm just going to drag and drop it right into Photoshop. And we need Photoshop's help here so that we can isolate some different sections of this photo that we can later animate then in Final Cut. So I'm going to zoom in, and I think our approach, like we tried in an earlier lesson here, was to take the diver and the rescuer, bring them up into the helicopter will be the animation. So we need to isolate them from this image. I'm going to use the lasso tool. You can make a quick selection with that, although the path tool would probably be more accurate for this one. So let me open up the paths palette here right from the window. I'll create a new palette. This is good practice anyway, and if you zoom in quite close in the image, tap the letter P on the keyboard for pen tool, and now you can essentially click and place little anchor points all around the image to isolate this portion of the image. And if you click and hold as you're making points, you can actually make curved line sections, which will make your path even more smooth and more accurate. Holding down the space bar occasionally so that I can quickly get to the hand tool and pan across my image. And this technique would work well if you're just trying to isolate one person out of a photo too. Maybe you want to enlarge them. If you make a mistake with the pen tool, you can hold down the command key and you'll quickly get a tool to be able to reposition one of those nodes, anchor points. Just trying to get my path restarted. Here we go. And in a moment we can use a function in the paths palette that will let us turn this path that we're making by hand into a regular Photoshop selection. And then all we'll need to do is float this portion of the photo on a new layer on its own. I'm just making sure here that I'm joining the endpoints. Add one more point and smooth it out. So I've got my path here. Now I'm going to pull from the flyout menu and make a selection. We can feather it slightly so it's got a bit of a soft edge to it, but not too much. And then back to the layers palette, I'm simply going to copy and paste that element. And now we can see that we do have it separated out. Now back in the original photo, in order for this effect to work, I do need to get rid of these two people as well. One of two ways I can do that. I'm going to use the content aware fill function in Photoshop CS5. And all I need to do for that is lasso a quick selection. I can fill the object with the content aware material from nearby. I could have just as easily, and I'll show you how that would work, I could have just as easily made that lasso selection maybe came over to another part of the image nearby, copied and pasted that, and used that to mask out the people. You'll notice I've got a little bit of an edge there, but chances are you probably wouldn't even notice that. I'll go back though and just use my content aware selection. Edit, fill. Now I need to save this image as a Photoshop document as a PSD. We need the layers intact when we move into Final Cut. And here's what that stage will look like. I've got a new Final Cut project here. I'm going to check to make sure that my sequence, before I get too far, is set to full HD quality. So I'm going to load the sequence preset for 1920 by 1080. And then I can import my photo. Waiting on the desktop, my PSD file. And I'll bring in a simple JPEG along with it as well, and just point out once again, like I did earlier on, the JPEG files, if I double click on them, will show up as a single image, and they show up as an image icon here in the browser. The Photoshop file though, the PSD file, when I double click on that, it's in fact a Final Cut sequence. So it's got one video layer already created for each of the corresponding Photoshop layers. So in order to use this, we're going to drag that sequence, the PSD sequence, right onto the timeline. And then I can double click on the sequence to open up the two layers that are contained in the sequence. And I can toggle my layers on and off. And you'll notice already in the preview window we can see the person disappear. The whole image needs to be a bit bigger. It's not quite filling the frame. So I'm going to come back to the main sequence, make sure I've got wireframe turned on here. Hold down the Option key and I can scale up the entire clip. Maybe shift it down a bit. You're just using the just drag the image like this. And then I'm going to double click inside the sequence, and we need to animate this layer, and that's quite simple to do. Double click on the layer, open it up in the preview window. You can see the piece of the layer is right there. We're going to keyframe animate this. So I'm going to move back to the very first frame in this animation sequence, or in this video clip, and I'm going to place a keyframe there. This little icon right here. Control K to add a keyframe. Then I'm going to move ahead to the final frame in this clip and place another keyframe. This time I'm going to reposition so that our two individuals will move further up. And that will have this effect. I can scrub through the effect in the Final Cut timeline, and we can see that video layer, that element, being keyframe animated between the in point and the out point that we set. Now the whole thing, in order for it to work, will need to be rendered. And that will take close to a minute here as Final Cut draws each of the... Okay, so there's our final rendered sequence, and I can zoom in a little bit on this. And play it through. And we can see the two people slowly being hoisted up into the helicopter. Now you could add a simple scale element to that entire clip as well right here in the main timeline. I could add some keyframes and animate that as well if I wanted to pan across the image or move down at the same time. and then re-render. That's it.